My name is Dr. Janina Borzek. I work as a data manager at the Infectious Diseases Data Observatory here in Oxford, and I primarily focus on the antimicrobial resistance theme that we have here at EDA. In a nutshell, antimicrobial resistance is quite a natural process actually for the bacteria, and that's a defense mechanism that bacteria develops in response to different antimicrobial treatments. So that could be antibiotics, antifungals, or perhaps anti-parasitic medication. And the problem that it possesses to us as humans is that if it develops resistance to antibiotics over time, we can't use those drugs anymore, and that is very difficult for pharmaceutical industry, for medical industry, and generally poses quite a great risk to the health of humans. So EDO primarily is an infectious diseases data repository. The main part of our job is to collect, standardize, and store clinical trials data, and then it is available for reuse and request. So people can come to our platform, submit a request, and DAC, which is Data Access Committee, which is completely independent from EDO, will assess the application and hopefully grant the data access rights. And I think that is fantastic input and contribution to all sorts of global health efforts, and a lot of our data is used for further large-scale analysis, and that in turn is used to inform policies and prescription changes and all sorts of interventions in health. And I think that's fantastic being a part of such an effort. Data reuse is a fantastic tool because it allows the researchers to pool the data from such a large database like the one that EDO has, for example, and filter through the data that is of interest to them. And for example, very often the young children or the pregnant women are either left out of standard studies, or there's very little participants with such characteristics. But then if we pool several studies together, we actually can achieve a significant number of those participants, and we can see the perhaps characteristics of them and whatever is the research question that the person is asking. So I think it is one of the advantages. And the second advantage is that using secondary data, so using EDO's data, is a unique opportunity, for example, for early career researchers who might not have the capacity or the funds yet to run a clinical trial from scratch or set up a surveillance program, while they can actually request the data and run the analysis and ask those questions for the already existing.
I'm Dr. Makoto Saito. I'm infectious disease physician and clinical epidemiologist at EDO. There are several important reasons why data reuse is very important. Among them, the most unique feature is that by pooling secondary data at individual patient level, we can answer some questions that cannot be answered or addressed by the original data alone, including subgroup analysis or effect modification. For example, take malaria. In pregnancy, pregnant women are excluded from clinical trials, and malaria is not the exception. There are very few evidence based on clinical trials in pregnancy. And what we did as the EDO and WARN is that pooling the data from clinical trials conducted in Asia and Africa, pulling them together to show the evidence on the efficacy and safety of antimalarials in pregnancy. And our work on the first trimester safety of antimalarial has changed the guideline of WHO in 2023. In low and middle income countries, the AMR issue is more problematic due to several issues like inappropriate and overuse of antibiotics, and also poorer infection control measurement, and also the presence of poor quality medications. And that hinders the generation of evidence-based approach to combat AMR. That's why we need to collect and gather the data available around the world to make the evidence-based suggestions, recommendations to combat AMR in these countries?
I think the main hope for our new AMR data platform that we've just established is to ultimately achieve a very similar results to what we have for other disease platforms, such as, for example, malaria, where after a lot of work and a lot of data, we were able to provide evidence for further research that was actually able to have a significant impact on the global policies. And I think with AMR, it could potentially and hopefully have the same impact. And I think it's an incredibly pressing issue, and we've been working a lot with the GRAM project, which is our main collaborator, and I think everyone in the AMR space is familiar with the most recent publications that they've had and the emphasis on the fact that AMR is the global biggest threat to human health, and the projections for 2050 on how much death and disability AMR can cause are very scary.